But Cable Bahamas has been playing great. Yeah, I can try to see what I can do with that.
Because I can be in court and we get tired. I'm in court for like the following week. I catch your line. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to read that from the back, yeah?
No.
No? Usually it's bigger than this, right?
Yes,
Much.
much.
Okay. Oh, so let me just come straight from work. You come straight from work.
Yeah.
Is that better? Click to the next slide, Mr. Thompson, for me, just in case.
I didn't really want
Is that better?
You don't mind me, I was
Okay.
being untruthful, but
No problem.
anyway. Mr. Thompson, I'm finally early.
That's something that
But guess what?
I'm so proud of you today.
I didn't do any reading.
You what? You don't have time to read right now.
I was trying to exhausted. We came out after 5 from court.
Uh-huh.
I'm tired.
Oh,
I have a headache and a run. But we can talk about it. I get a chance to read one chapter. What chapter do you want again? Is it 10? Don't mind me. I have to take the holiday and read. I spent my whole holiday to read. The last reading I want nobody's leave. Only when we go over in class. We on 11 now, because I remember reading 10 in class last week. We on 11.
what I was going to do tonight is step back for a few minutes and 7, I normally start you with a 407. Just want to step back.
I know we
here for a
talked about
couple of while.
insider dealing and all that last
Yeah.
week. Yeah, we talked about chapter 10 last week. Or chapter 10 for last year, no?
That's why I say just step back into 7. Pardon? We're just gonna zoom back into 7 and then move forward again because I know Ms. Archer got 7.
Yeah, she did.
Oh, sorry, she did.
I gotta remember.
No, she swapped 7 with 8, 9, remember?
I don't think we did
The
do that.
assignments, we didn't do 7.
We didn't do 7.
Yeah.
We did do
No,
7.
we didn't.
And then our assignment was had to do with unit 8.
So you would have done 8.
We did 8.
Yeah,
we did 8. Yeah, we did 8.
Swapped 7 and 8 because the 8 dealt with the assignment to.
Okay.
Do we have anything in reference to factor, in terms of our regulations and anything? Do we have anything in relation to that yet? How
I mean,
we're gonna
locally as a
do,
jurisdiction.
locally, right, as a jurisdiction? How we're gonna deal with factor?
I saw some, well, again, to remember that.
Because I was supposed to go on the website. I went on securities and insurance commission for different reasons. I started,
You wouldn't find it on any of those. I was supposed, in fact, I was supposed to make a call today because I heard that, FATCA has always been dealt with by the Ministry of Financial Services.
okay,
And then I heard recently that they were trying to see if they could have the Compliance Commission to some responsibility for some aspect of it.
okay, that probably would make sense, right?
It does not.
No?
It does not make sense, and I'm gonna, for what it's worth, I'm gonna question them on it, and I'm gonna challenge them on that.
That have to do with taxes and like the information
not the-
And the
exchange of
compliance
information.
commission is strictly anti-money
Compliance,
laundering.
yeah.
That's a strict mandate, so I don't even see, I don't see, no.
So which one are it? Because, see, that's what I
I
was
can
asking the
more
other
see
day.
the Securities Commission, and even that is questionable.
Okay. Remember now, we don't have the
Certainly not the
financial,
compliance commission.
okay, because we don't have there was supposed to be this Financial Services Act. This one regulatory body. I remember when I was drafting it, we were working on it.
Yes.
What happened to that? So that's not gonna come along anymore?
I don't know, the last time
Shouldn't we have
they
that
were still
though?
talking about, that's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah,
To
'cause
have an umbrella financial services body,
Organization,
an
yeah.
oversight body. Every other jurisdiction is
Has
moving in
it?
that direction.
Right.
Even though they have separate agencies, they still,
We were supposed
they
to,
still work together under one umbrella.
because I remember I did some research for it, because that's the time when the insurance regulations were being codified. And we did research, I remember doing the research on it. But I never, because I left the section, so I never knew if this legislation came into force.
Okay.
No?
It never
Nothing?
did, well, I don't think it ever was passed,
You know,
we
could
talked
just
about
let
it.
that go.
There was a fight, let's be real, we know what the fight is in this country.
Yeah.
First fight is, if you create a superstructure, who is going to help?
Yeah, that's true.
And if you don't answer that question, believe me, you're not going to get much further. But it made sense. In fact, it was the only thing that made sense. for the
I
moment.
remember doing, I spent a considerable amount of time dealing with it, that's why, yeah.
Sorry?
I could have been focusing on that.
Cases.
Yeah, I brought that.
There was an email? Denise, you sent it to me, right?
Nah, I just found an old email and
Denise, I don't know, I get your questions. Oh, where's the, and I'd be like, wait a minute. I check my email though, let me check.
yes, before you you could.
Okay, you're there. Kristen, you're on the list.
That was me.
Okay.
You're feeling it. I just want to
Yeah,
say-
yeah,
Sorry.
you should have brought that.
I thought it was going to hit wires.
Because it was,
Yeah, no problem.
my auntie was sending stuff to her friend too. A.M. is Kristen A.M.?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I did.
There's no ones right there. There's two, right?
Yeah, but I got sorted. I can check. Yeah, I think so. She said once she said on the left.
Did I see the name on it?
Yeah, I was.
I can't find any that didn't have the answer. If I want someone to find the answer. Yeah, without having the answer. Good job. Right, yeah.
What did you do?
Oh, sorry, I didn't do this.
It's gonna come up there doing it globally.
Oh, okay. Oh, I should have left it.
Yeah.
Oh, you should have told me that.
There she is, Hadassah.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Hadassah. Hadassah.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
That's
I'm
great.
good, thanks.
So it's just another lady.
Okay, good to have you with us. And for everybody else, we're going to proceed this evening.
Thank
We know
you.
that. Can you hear me properly?
I can, yes.
Okay. We're going to proceed this evening. We missed you over the last couple of weeks. Some technical glitches,
Yes.
but we believe that we have it sorted out now, and good to have you with us. We know that everybody has been using every hour of the day except for their working hours to read and to review and to examine all these concepts that you have been looking at over these couple of months. And so we wish to say to you, keep on reading and happy reading. What we want to do this evening is to step back a bit and to look for a short while in Unit 7. We're going to look for a while in Unit 7, and then we will come forward again, and we won't keep you for the full time this evening. We want to just share a few things with you and talk again about preparing for the home stretch, and then you will be on your way. When it comes to this whole business of Unit 7, Hadassah?
Call ended. Hung up.
While she's doing that, let me ask the rest of you. Over the last couple of days, since last week, Wednesday, all of you would have been reading, I'm sure. Everybody would have been preparing for the home stretch, I'm sure. Again, I want to apologize on behalf of what has been occurring with the Institute in terms of little communication glitches, but we believe that we are getting it all sorted out. We were still uncertain as to who did what and who covers what. To do it for a while is. How many of you have read and perhaps feel comfortable with Unit 7? How many of you have looked at Unit 7? When we talk about Unit 7, we are basically starting out talking about prudential regulation. Anybody familiar with that term? I want to share what that term means. When you talk about prudential regulation, you're talking about any mechanism, systems that you put in place to protect the viability, the sustainability, the overall success of the financial services system, either within an institution, from a regional perspective, global perspective. You can look at it as broadly as you wish, but prudential regulation basically has to do with those mechanisms that you put in place to avoid failure or to try to prevent, as much as is possible, failure or collapses within the financial services sector. We know that when we come to this whole business of financial prudential regulation, that really is an area that you want to pay particular attention to. Some persons would say that in terms of prudential regulation, they may not immediately see the connection between what you would call prudential regulation and anti-money laundering. Because some people think, okay, anti-money laundering has to do with people cleaning up money and all of that. And they may look at prudential regulation as being something on the banking side or something that you ought to be concerned about to avoid bank failure. It is bigger than that. In fact, when you're talking about prudential regulation, it comes back to the very heart of this entire program, and that is compliance. Dealing with how do you put mechanisms in place to ensure compliance. And so I would have hoped that by now the slides would have been back up. I'm not sure if they're making, someone who watched 2020, can you tell me what's going on up there?
Nothing.
Nothing, okay. I wonder if I should go back to the presentation. Let us proceed again and see what occurs. We want to look at some specific objectives for this evening. The first thing we want to do is to explore this whole business of prudential regulation. What is it about? We want to talk about that for a while. We want to talk about a general overview of the global financial crisis. What caused that? What were the effects of the global financial crisis? So can you all see that? The global financial crisis. You want to examine this whole serious issue of Lehman Brothers. We know that that has become, it had been a hot topic for quite a few years now. You want to look at this whole business of how do you regulate in a prudential manner in what is called a changing or a change global landscape. You want to take a brief overview of the European Union. You want to look at the European Banking Authority and the European Securities and Markets Authority, European Insurance and Occupational Pensions. We want to take a brief overview of the European Union Directive. You know that there are several directives. Every time you look around and you become familiar with one directive, it's almost as if they saw something else coming your way. You want to look at the UK, the US Dodd-Frank Act. You want to look at the United Kingdom and what has been going on there and the Asian financial crisis. And then we will look at complying with the new rules. I'm sure that's in your way now. Okay. Is that there? Not there. You two want to everybody set? Okay, once again, prudential regulation. You're talking about the measures that you will put in place to ensure that what occurred a couple of years ago does not continue to occur. You're talking about trying to protect the global financial system from systemic risk. You're talking about putting mechanisms in place to ensure that the system, the global financial system, remains intact, and that there are really minimal effects on the system itself. And when we talk about putting systems in place, we're talking about something that we want to look at from the global perspective, meaning that look at what occurred just a couple of years ago in 2007 and 2008. Who would ever think that a few persons making a couple of decisions within a particular financial institution could really affect the whole world? Do you recognize that, having regard for what occurred in 2007, going into 2008, financial services as we know it has changed forever? In fact, if we step back, let's step back and look at basically what is also a very serious contributing factor to this whole thing, the whole fiasco of 9/11. And we know that because of 9/11, not only travel, which affects all of us, but global financial intermediary services have changed forever. Because of that, because of the 9/11, we know that led to the passage of legislation relative to terrorism financing. We know that the whole world became much more conscious of what happens within financial institutions as a result of the 9/11 fiasco. Meaning that once you are doing business with a financial institution, there are so many more checks and balances today than there were prior to the 9/11 fiasco. Meaning that if financial institutions are requiring so much more than they did back then. So many things were taken for granted. We took for granted that first of all, every financial institution was created to do good business. Everybody within the financial institution were upright, good citizens who were there to try to serve the customers and provide financial intermediary services. Another assumption was that customers or potential customers going to establish relationship with financial institutions would want to do so in an honorable way, that they all had good intentions. These were fallacies, these were assumptions which were made. Obviously, with the 9/11 fiasco, there's much more scrutiny on financial institutions, financial intermediary services, potential customers. Everyone now who presents him or herself to a financial institution is treated differently, all because of 9/11. We know that in terms of this whole business, and we talked about it 2 weeks ago, what was established as a very convenient way to transact business, wire transfer. One of the ways where persons on one side of the world can transfer funds to another side of the world expeditiously. Obviously, well-intentioned, but subject to abuse, and it was abuse. And so the whole scheme of wire transfer the whole mechanism surrounding wire transfer has changed. And so when we talk about this whole business of 9/11, it changed everything. On the heel of that came this whole business of this whole financial crisis having to do with, again, somebody thinking of something honorable. What is more honorable than people, families having their own homes? You can hardly think of anything more honorable than a person goes to work. Well, first of all, a person educates him or herself, goes into the workplace, and usually, in most cases, most decent people we know have an ambition of owning a home at some point in time in their career, in his or her career. And then we saw where persons vying for home, aspiring to build or buy their own homes, flooded the financial services sector, flooded financial institutions. So much so that because there was a propensity to help these people, some people didn't keep an eye on some things that they should have been monitoring. And the short and long of it is that many persons were made to qualify for loans for home ownership, in some, to a less extent business ownership, business ventures that they were not qualified for. And so we're talking about an overabundance of persons getting loans which they could not support, getting loans that they could not handle. Therein, you're talking about, it only would have been a matter of time before the bottom drops out. And so the whole financial services, financial crisis has to do with a number of things, but they all boil down to this cause, compliance. And what happens when there is non-compliance? What happens when there is a lack of measures in place to ensure that people are doing what they ought to be doing, that financial institutions are doing what they ought to be doing? When I say financial institution, I say that very generally, but we know for the most part, we're talking about the leadership in financial institutions. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the obligation of the board of directors, senior management. And what we saw from the financial crisis is that a lot of the untoward behavior, a lot of the missteps occurred at senior levels. It occurred in areas that persons would not have ordinarily been zooming in on. Unfortunately, in so many financial institutions, persons would think that the missteps would occur at least at the middle level, or even more so, perhaps the junior level, the ground level, where persons are transacting business on a daily basis. From the time this whole business of anti-money laundering and compliance was promoted a couple of decades ago, unfortunately, persons zoomed in on the frontline staff. And so they say, okay, frontline people, you're held accountable. These are the red flags you ought to be looking for. Unfortunately, there weren't any red flags for board members. There weren't any red flags for senior management. Senior management just went on doing as they please, and unfortunately, basically, seemingly were unanswerable to anybody. And so they just made decisions, and we know that unfortunately those decisions came back to cause an adverse effect on the global financial services sector. And so because of all of that, we're looking at strengthening prudential regulation, strengthening the measures which are put in place to ensure that the financial services sector remains robust and that, that the risks are minimized. Notice I said minimize. You can never altogether do away with risk. As long as you have financial services sectors, you will have risks. As long as you have people, you will have people trying to circumvent and trying to circumvent the proper processes within financial institutions. And so risk is always a factor. What is intended is that through prudential regulation, you would minimize those risks. You would try to manage those risks in the most effective manner. And so prudential regulation has to do with all that you put in place to try to manage, mitigate, and manage the risk. One would think that that with the financial crisis of 2007 going into 2008, that all financial institutions would be on top of their game, so to speak, that they would. But do you think we ought to be satisfied that we learned enough from that? Do you think we've learned from it? Let's look at it from a local perspective. It is only now and every now and then you would hear a pronouncement, perhaps from the central bank, every now and then, that talks about credit worthiness or something like that. But are we really serious within the individual financial institution to properly scrutinize who credit is extended to, how people manage loans, how people manage their financial services, their financial affairs? We see it every day where persons within institutions, when I say institutions, government institutions, workplaces generally, really, I mean, people are just quick to sign a salary deduction slip. Yeah. Just quick to sign it. Why are they quick to sign it? Because all the advertisements said, come in, give us a salary deduction authorization, and a loan is guaranteed. That's the extent of advertisements nowadays. Easy credit, easy loan, and so if we are not careful, we can be going down a dark road again if we're not careful. Anybody agrees with that point? We see where if we are not careful, some persons will, quote unquote, max themselves out. I have known of instances where persons take home, I mean, I know people make okay money, you know. People who make enough to survive on at the end of the month, because the monies are dispersed here, there, and everywhere. Persons are still living stressful lives, and that's to put it mildly. In fact, you kind of wonder why some persons are so stressed on the job and upset because they got paid 2 days ago and they don't have lunch for the day because the money spent elsewhere. I'm only saying all of that to say, in the local context, and you may want to think about it, this is why I'm sharing and want to flesh out this point. You may want to think about what could happen if we do not strengthen prudential regulation in the past. Again, we see where organizations, financial organizations invite people to do things which they ought not be doing, meaning signing their lives away. This whole business of home ownership, again, I admire people who want a home. Unfortunately, would you agree with me if I suggest that some people want the home that they cannot afford anymore? You know, they want to live in areas that they cannot afford. Again, it's commendable that people want to, everybody wants to improve their lot in life. But this here speaks to the core issue, which is persons not managing their affairs properly, which can have a spiraling effect on the entire economy. What happens? What happened in the financial crisis of 2007, 2008? The short and long of it is that some people made some very bad decisions. Financial institutions made some very poor judgment calls, and there were bailouts. Who suffered from the bailout? Everybody, because everybody has to come to the rescue for a few people who made bad decisions. Now I know there are some bleeding hearts who may say, Lord, but you have that out there. You have to balance that too with, don't people have a responsibility to make responsible decisions? That is what prudential regulation is all about. Ensuring that people make responsible choices and that persons do not live, meaning that persons, everybody who is working is fully aware of his or her salary. When it comes